So there must have been quite a bit of, I know, like in the process of writing the book too, there's just a lot of data, right, in terms of what you collected in terms of interviews, photos, researching all this stuff. How did it come about, actually, just doing this project? And how long has it sort of taken you to...
Yeah, well, like I mentioned, Chris O'Connor started this 25 years ago.
Okay, yeah.
With some interviews, some some bit of writing, and with some notes with Alan, and Chris was really when I sort of started thinking, because I'd been thinking about these guys, because Primitive Art Group, it's a little bit like Velvet Underground or something. It was quite a mysterious band to me, because I'd heard about them. I knew like Anthony was involved, but it was almost like a kind of mythical band, and it's something about the name as well. It was really intriguing. Who was this band? I don't know if their records are quite hard to find. I've got them now, but it's the stuff that had happened before I was around. So I was always like interested to dig deeper into it, and then I realised this project really started 10 years ago, 2014. I applied for and got a small grant from National Library of Culture and Heritage, I think, to do an oral history project, which basically meant talking to each of the key people that were part of the Primitive Art Group and Braille. That was Anthony, Stewart, Neil Duncan, David Donaldson, that is, David Watson, Steve Roach, and Janet Roddick, I think, were the initial ones. I did a series of interviews with those guys in 2014, and then sort of sat on it for a while. And Norman Meehan had been he'd kind of given a couple of lectures and used those interviews a little bit in some of the stuff he was doing, and had included like Anthony, and had kind of written a little bit about this scene in some of the work he was doing. And I can't remember, I think he emailed me and said, hey man, you should apply for this called a fellowship, a research fellowship through the Lilburn Trust that's based at the National Library. So I thought, why not? And so I applied for that and miraculously got that. So that was the thing that enabled this to happen, was I had a year of paid work essentially with an office at the National Library to take what I'd started, which was those interviews, and do a whole bunch more, but also like just really dive into what was available archival material, and amassing this kind of like you mentioned, like I got all these files of I printed out and transcribed, and like about 60 something interviews, and got all of these. It was amazing actually how many reviews were around from that time. Of a band like Primitive Art Group in the 80s doing their gigs. These amazing reviews in magazines like Tom Magazine and In Touch, which are Wellington-based music magazines that went for 5 or 6 years. Gary Steele, Red Migieska, these people were amazing writers that were reviewing these gigs, and so I had this huge pile of reviews.
What was kind of the general sort of feeling from the reviewers of this kind of, I guess, would be kind of like alien music at the time?
Yeah,
right.
The first ones were really good in terms of really good for me to use, because they were terrible reviews.
Okay.
It was the first reviews were from the 1980 Jazz Festival, which is a straight ahead jazz festival. I mean, it's nothing to do with the current Wellington Jazz Festival, but it's put on by Colin Hemmington and Roger Fox were the sort of people that put it on, and they knew, Anthony knew Roger, he got a gig. So as it happened, him and Stewart did a duo as one of the sets, and that set provided some really great material in terms of reviews. There's a whole interview with a guy called Lanny Morgan, who's an American saxophonist who was there at the festival. He just ranted how terrible that music was. He hated it. And another reviewer totally slated them in the Dom or the Evening Post or something. So that was the start. That was the start of their public performing life, really. Yeah. And it was great because that provided me with kind of like this, in terms of like a story. That story, you got to. It's weird. I realise as a writer, you can manufacture this kind of narrative because you're filtering out all this stuff, you know. So when I was sort of, just to kind of go back one step, after having amassed all this information and all these reviews like those ones and interviews and stuff, and then I had all this stuff. Because I'm not a writer, man. I was like, how do I? I didn't know how to. Then I was like, okay, let's do it. And I sat down and I was just like, if I know how to do it, like, how do I actually like go from that to like having it written? And I kind of tried and failed, and it was just like was going nowhere. And actually, Chris Burke gave me some good advice. I went and talked to him, and he said, "Oh, you're missing a whole step, the crucial step, which is you've done all the research with, a big body of it. Then you got to organise that." and he had a document for, I think it was Blue Smoke. He showed me his document, which was, there's all the research. Then he made this document, which was like systematically organising all of that research into like subjects and keywords and all this kind of stuff, so he could then it's like an index for him to then go and find stuff in his writing. And his pretty sure his index, writing, organising file was about 150 pages long. Right. I was like, oh my God, that's like another whole year's worth of work just getting to that. But, I did a kind of my version of that, and then embarked on the kind of writing part, which, it's definitely the hardest thing I've ever had to do, I think. It was terrible.
But an essential resource, because I feel like one thing I take away from talking over the years with Anthony and Dave Don and all the family from there is just the kind of adversity they faced in terms of like popular culture, but the perseverance of like just staying true to that idea. How do you think, if we think about that that framing of time that you talk about from like 78 through to early 90s when Braille finished and everything, from that point onwards, the influence that this group of people and this kind of, I guess, this collective of people has had, mostly on the scene here in Wellington, but also I feel it's also branched out from here as well. Would that be right in thinking that as well? I mean, in terms of, I guess,
as much as me,
I guess the question is like, how do you think it's really? I mean, I know personally how it's kind of influenced me through knowing them, in terms of like thinking, not just kind of down here, but also looking around. Because I guess I'm asking you to talk a little bit about what has evolved from.
Yeah, well, I mean, someone like Anthony has never stopped playing.
Right.
In fact, we have a gig together tonight.
Yes.
In a few hours' time. And so I guess in some ways, and it's interesting, I mean, when like these guys are young, in their 20s, and they were quite young doing this, the amount of energy you have for a project like that and what it means to your subsequent sort of life as an artist is huge. But there's been more time gone since then and more music made and everything. Like, I think about in terms of, the legacy of these guys, easy one to talk about is Plan 9, which is so David Donaldson, that's Anthony's brother, Steve Roche and Janet Roddick, and include David Long in that as well. They've gone from doing this, David Don, was one of the Primitive Art Group, he's the bass player, very, untaught really, and super DIY musician. He's had a whole career now doing music for film and huge films as well, like part of Lord of the Rings, that kind of stuff that's happening in Wellington. They've had Plan 9 as a film composing company, has been going, I guess, 30, maybe more years, and so like although it's different than what they were doing here, it's like there's still a lot of that same ethos in the music making that they do for TV shows and stuff in the music, I feel, and that's being heard by the people who would have absolutely no idea any of this stuff, but still there's a certain sound and a kind of way, I guess, they approach music making, which is still based in the stuff they were doing then. And the same probably for all of those musicians, I think it's kind of fair to say the person who has had the most direct influence in terms of one-on-one stuff from that group in Wellington would be Anthony, who really hasn't changed what he's been doing since the 1978, Still goes up and down Cuba Street, dropping to cafes, looking for records in record shops, listening to music, getting stoned and playing music. This is kind of his life, It has been this has been the way since he first came to town.
And I guess his mentorship too. I think that's a big part too when you think about all of his disciples. The Donaldson, which is I feel myself was included in that too, and I know speak probably for a whole lot of other people that have been who have sat, as you talked about Anthony's studio, smoking a cigarette, listening to records. I remember going up to Anthony's studio a lot in Plan 9 and be a pile of records there. That's where I first heard Magma and a whole lot of all the Black Saint record catalogue was through Anthony. It was valuable, right? So in a way, I feel would you go as far as calling them really not only as a collective of creative music, but also an institution in a way?
Well, I reckon I don't know what an institution is really, but
I guess a body that kind of goes out, but it sort of has a.
If you think about the people that have been have had really close musical relationships with Anthony, someone like Toby Lang, him and Ant would play. When I was first sort of hanging with Anthony in Arthur Street, it's around the same time, so Toby and Joe actually, so Joe Lindsay, both of those guys are now in Fat Freddy's. I've never asked them, but for sure, they would have been influenced heavily by that time,
of course,
spent hanging and playing with Ant in those early years for them. Same goes for you, me, Chris O'Connor, Jeff Henderson. There's loads of people that have had that same experience,
There's a correlation too, I think, between, because we all went to the jazz school, right? There's a correlation between all of us who didn't quite make it through the jazz school somehow ended up becoming these jazz school orphans and got taken in by Ant and got given this whole other education, which I think is really kind of I know for me it's really shaped the way I think about it. When I know with Toby and Joe and as well, they've just their sort of musical mechanism, their way of thinking about music has definitely been,
Well, I reckon there is a shared. It's not like you couldn't write really a manifesto, but there's a kind of shared philosophy of an approach to music making that lots of people in this town, and I'm thinking of like kind of next generation, someone like Corey Champion, who's playing tonight also in this gig. You know, Corey would feel kind of the same way about Anthony as a mentor, especially as a drummer. One amazing thing which I'm always so jealous about is that and it's not just Anthony, but he's really good at sort of like pulling all the drummers together and like having this little gang, which are all the drummers. And it's not, I mean, there must be some aspect of competitiveness in there as well, but you know, it's like a family within a family, the drummer family. And it's amazing, you know, like Rick Cranston, Corey, there's you, there's Chris, it's all like amazing.
Otis as well.
Otis.
It's like a big,
Yeah.
It's, I guess too, talking about that idea of an institution, because I guess at the time, when Braille was happening in Primitive Art Group, if we look at their counterparts internationally too, like what was happening in Europe, in terms of like music that was happening there, you got like Spontaneous Music Ensemble and you know, John Stevens and that whole scene. Then you've got like Cecil Taylor, and you've got, you know, Art Ensemble, and you've got all these other kind of groups which parallel in a way sort of predate that sort of way. The Primitive Art Group and the Braille have kind of flown in these kind of different philosophies of music and ideas of making, which is again influenced. Would that be accurate in saying? Because I know that they that's where I learned about a lot of their music was through Anthony and David. So do you think they were onto something that not many people were
Definitely.
mainstream New Zealand was really onto? They're ahead of
For sure, yeah. And it's one of the it's an interesting question, is like how original is original music, you know, like how original is what Primitive Art Group were doing in terms of like what was happening in, broadly speaking, jazz music around the world. And they definitely weren't, you know, like, let's say Art Ensemble of Chicago, which was one of the biggest influences, at least early influences of what these guys were doing. You know, they'd been doing that for, we're talking 1980, it's like 15 years probably, or at least 10 to 15 years of that sort of music making. And so there was this, I mean, I'm speaking on their behalf. They might disagree with what I'm saying, but I have written about this like at length in this book. You know, they were working out of their record collections, they were kind of obsessive about trying to find this music. But interestingly, you know, it wasn't until there's an episode about this in this book. It was like 1982 or maybe 1983 that the Schlippenbach trio, so that's Alexander von Schlippenbach, a German pianist, and Paul Lovens, the drummer, and Evan Parker. So three like top-notch European improvisers. That was the first chance that these guys had ever had to actually see anyone play that kind of music that they were into, trying to do, listening to. It's the first chance they'd had to see it live. So even though they were kind of listening to this stuff, they'd never, you know, it's a totally different experience when you're actually in a situation where there are other musicians playing and you can see them, you can learn from them, you hang out with them, you play in their groups and all that kind of stuff. There was none of that kind of transmission going on. It was always like through records, and, you know, some lovely quotes in there, like Stuart was saying, we were influenced, but listening to a record, I'm sort of paraphrasing Stuart a bit, but listening to a record is like you're listening to the same little notes over and over again. You can't actually be influenced much by it because you can't talk to that person. You can play along to it, but you can't make them play anything different. You know, it's like it's like a different type of experience for these guys being over here without any real role models. There's someone like Jim Langerbeer, who was and a jazz musician, saxophonist, and doing free stuff. Before, like a long time before these guys were doing it, you know, at least 10 years before. But they didn't have, and they, you know, they would have been aware of someone like Jim, but they didn't have any. He wasn't in Wellington for a start, but they didn't have much connection with even someone like him. You know, it was like weirdly this sort of like exclusive little closed bubble. You know, yeah.
Amazing. Well, I feel like, what do you think, why should people have this book? I'm asking this mostly for students of music. I'm asking this on behalf of students of music and people that are thinking about becoming a musician, thinking that there are other ways of engaging with music outside of spending thousands of dollars at a university or whatever. If there's one way you could really sum up in terms of, like, you know, we speak about Modi, like that energy or the life force of something. What is it? And with this poema here, really, like, that you'd want people to absorb.
Well, I find that. So the dedication, there's a dedication at the start of this book. The dedication is for all the musicians of Wellington, past, present and future. And what I mean by that is, like, this is a book for, primarily, it's for the people I'm writing about. So it's for Stuart, Anthony, Dave, Don. It's for them.
Awesome.
I'm telling their story, but it's also, I'm part of that, you know. It's our family. It's a family history. And we're part of this musical family, and it is really close family, you know. And it's also for the future. So it's for that book's it's weird. I just realised that after I actually got the physical copy, that's going to outlive me by a long time, you know. Like, there will be around. There'll be copies at a library somewhere for people to check out, like, into the future. And so it's a way for, you know, once these guys, like, pass on, it's a way for their story to just remain known and relevant. And it's an extraordinary story. And it kind of like, I find the, I was actually talking to Anthony when I was embarking on this, and I was trying to, like, figure out a way into the writing. Anthony's like, you gotta write it like Barry Crump. It's gotta be like it can't be like a, you know, academic book. It's gotta be like a yarn. And actually the trajectory of their story is really interesting as a kind of narrative, I feel. So just for people that, aside from if you're a musician or know this or want to know about free music here or whatever, like, just the story is really cool. Yeah. So that's what I hope some people may get out of it who don't have any affiliation musically with what these guys are doing. It's like, this is a story of some people that just decided they wanted to do this thing and got up there and did it. And it's like, how do you do that? Yeah.
That's the perfect answer. Thank you for making this, Dan, and for all of us. And congratulations again.
Thank you.
Kia ora.
Pleasure.